$237 billion. That's not the GDP of a country. That's not the market cap of a Fortune 500 company. That is the single net worth figure that walked out of California in one wire transfer on March 2, 2026, when Mark Zuckerberg put his name on a $170 million deed in Miami, and California's most catastrophic financial nightmare officially began. But here's the part nobody is saying out loud. Zuckerberg wasn't first. He wasn't even second. And the governor of California knew, on the record in a transcript, exactly what was about to happen. 32 days before the wire cleared, he said it himself, in his own words, on a stage in San Francisco. And then he watched it happen anyway. Hey everyone, today we're going to do something the financial press refuses to do. We're going to read the receipts. Not the press releases, not the campaign slogans, the actual documents, the property records, the SEC filings, the Hoover Institution analysis, the California Legislative Analyst Office's own projections. Because when you line those documents up in chronological order, a very specific story emerges. And it is not the story California's government wants you to hear. By the end of this video, you're going to know 5 things that should genuinely concern you whether you live in California or not. Number 1. The exact dollar figure California loses every single year going forward from just 6 departures. Number 2. The sentence Gavin Newsom said on January 29, 2026, 32 days before Zuckerberg's wire cleared, that predicted his own state's collapse word for word. Number 3. The housing project Meta killed the same week Zuckerberg moved to Miami, and why nobody connected those two events. Number 4. The Hoover Institution number that proves the Billionaire Tax Act didn't just fail. It generated negative revenue before a single vote was cast. And number 5. Why Florida, the supposed winner in all of this, is now quietly building the same trap California just detonated. There's a name I want you to write down right now. Mayra Castañeda. We'll come back to her in about 10 minutes. She's the person nobody in the financial press is talking about, and she's the one who actually paid the price for all of this. Let's start with the document trail. Pull up the calendar, because the dates do all the work here. Summer 2025. California is carrying a structural deficit projected between $27 and $35 billion through the next several budget cycles. The Legislative Analyst Office, the state's own independent fiscal watchdog, has already warned that the budget balance Newsom's team keeps presenting is, in their words, an illusion. The real structural shortfall, they say, will run $22 to $27 billion annually through 2030. Now here's the architecture of California's problem, and it is the most dangerous fiscal architecture in America. The top 1% of California taxpayers, roughly a few thousand individuals, supply nearly 50% of all personal income tax revenue in a $350 billion state budget. Half the budget. Resting on a group of people who can get on a plane tomorrow. And that's the math that should stop you cold. Because California isn't just tax dependent on the wealthy. California is existentially dependent on a handful of individuals who, as of 2025, are running the numbers every quarter and asking themselves a very simple question. Is staying worth it? Now layer on what California's legislature did next. The 2026 California Billionaire Tax Act, officially the one-time wealth tax initiative for state-funded healthcare, education, and food assistance programs, was drafted by 3 academics and backed by the SEIU Healthcare Union. It proposed a one-time 5% tax on the global net worth of any California resident worth more than $1 billion. And here's the mechanism that made it different from any tax proposal in American history. It targeted unrealized gains. Not money you've taken out of your company. Not stock you've sold. The paper value sitting on your balance sheet. Private equity stakes, illiquid assets, venture positions, all of it on the table. Larry Page's California tax bill under this proposal. Approximately $13.1 billion. Sergey Brin's, $12.5 billion. Mark Zuckerberg's, $11.7 billion. That's a combined $37.3 billion from 3 people. And the union behind the initiative had already collected 1.12 million signatures, almost double what was needed to qualify for the November ballot. The retroactive clause made it irreversible. Anyone who was a California resident on January 1, 2026 owed the bill, even if they packed up and left before the vote. That was the plan. Lock them in legally before they could move. There was just one problem. The lawyers got there first. Here is what the retroactive residency clause actually produced. Not compliance. A stampede. Every estate attorney in Silicon Valley ran the same calculation at the same time. Retroactive taxation of people who leave before a law passes is constitutionally fragile at best, and in a worst-case scenario gets struck down entirely, meaning the people who stayed to fight it in court would have paid, while the people who left beforehand would have paid nothing. The rational move if you have $10 billion and a private jet is obvious. So the exit started in late 2025, and it was coordinated, deliberate, and precisely timed. Larry Page had already been building a real estate footprint in Florida for months. He ultimately put roughly $190 million into Miami area properties before the January 1st residency deadline. Sergey Brin, worth approximately $125 billion, secured a lakeside estate in Nevada and reportedly told Governor Newsom personally at a Christmas party in December 2025 that he was leaving California. Brin then donated $20 million to a counter-campaign called Building a Better California, specifically to fight the wealth tax he was already leaving over. Peter Thiel, Florida. Don Hankey, the auto loan magnate, Nevada. Travis Kalanick. He moved his legal residency on December 18, 2025, 13 days before the January 1st deadline. Steven Spielberg, New York, January 1, 2026. Howard Schultz, Miami, March 10, 2026. And then, on March 2, 2026, Mark Zuckerberg's name appeared on the deed at 7 Indian Creek Island Road, Miami. $170 million. 9 bedrooms. 11.5 bathrooms. A library with a hidden passageway. A 1,500-gallon aquarium. His neighbor confirmed he planned to be moved in by April. 21 years of California residency, 21 years of California stock sales, California capital gains, California income tax. Gone. With one wire transfer. Now. I told you there was a document, and we're almost there. But first, you need to understand what Gavin Newsom actually said, and when he said it, because this is the part that changes everything. January 29, 2026. Bloomberg Businessweek event, San Francisco. The governor of California is on stage. He is, at this moment, the frontrunner in prediction markets for the 2028 Democratic presidential nomination. Every word he says gets transcribed. He calls the Billionaire Tax Act really damaging to the state. He says it will drive away affluent residents. He says it will reduce the tax base. And then he says the line. I'm going to read it exactly as Bloomberg printed it. The fact is, it actually will reduce investments in education. It will reduce investments in teachers and librarians, childcare, and reduce investments in firefighting and police. Read that again. The governor of California, on the record in San Francisco on January 29, 2026, 32 days before Zuckerberg's wire transfer cleared, predicted exactly what was about to happen to his own state. He named the teachers. He named the librarians. He named the firefighters. He named the police. He knew. And then in the same interview, he said this about his overall approach to the state's tax structure. I aggressively defend the progressive tax structure. We don't just defend it, we promote it. Read both timestamps. January 29th. He says the structure pushes them out. January 29th. He says he promotes the structure. March 2nd. Zuckerberg's deed clears. The governor predicted the withdrawal slip. And then he signed the authorization for the bank run. Now let's talk about what the Hoover Institution actually found, because this is the part that should be in every headline in America and isn't. The Billionaire Tax Act was projected by its supporters to generate $100 billion, 90% earmarked for healthcare, the rest for education and food assistance. That was the number the union put in its campaign materials. That was the number on the ballot summary. Here is what the Hoover Institution's independent analysis found. Just 6 departures, 6 individuals leaving before the law passed, immediately vaporized $26.7 billion of that projected revenue. Not eventually, immediately, before a single vote was cast. But it gets worse, because those 6 individuals aren't just gone for the one-time wealth tax, They're gone for every future year of standard California income tax, capital gains tax, and estate tax. When the Hoover Institution modeled the net present value of those ongoing losses against the projected one-time gain, the result was a negative $24.7 billion. California didn't just lose the tax revenue. California lost more money than the tax would have raised. The policy that was supposed to save the healthcare system structurally damaged the fiscal foundation that funds it. And here's the number the California Legislative Analyst Office confirmed, in calm, bureaucratic language that somehow made it even more devastating. The LAO projected that the law would produce a temporary increase followed by an ongoing decrease in state income tax revenues of hundreds of millions of dollars or more annually. Forever. Forever. That word is in the LAO's own published analysis. Not in a Republican opposition brief. Not in a tax foundation study. The state's own independent fiscal office said, "This policy will cost California money every year, forever." Meanwhile, venture capitalist Chamath Palihapitiya wrote publicly on X that California's taxable billionaire wealth had dropped from over $2 trillion to under $1 trillion in a matter of weeks. The bank run was complete before the ballot measure was even certified. I told you to write down a name. Mayra Castaneda. She's an SEIU United Healthcare Workers West member. One of the public faces of the Billionaire Tax campaign. Her line to reporters, "Ultra-wealthy billionaires have seen their fortunes skyrocket even as food, rent, and gas prices increasingly crush working families." That's what the $100 billion was for. Emergency rooms, hospital beds, mental health facilities in counties where closures had already begun. Mayra's coalition was one signature drive away from cashing the check. And then, 6 of the largest names left before the window closed. But the damage didn't stop at the tax revenue. It moved from the billionaires to the company to the city. On May 1, 2026, the same week Zuckerberg was settling into Indian Creek Island, Meta's spokesperson issued a kill notice for Willow Village. That was Meta's planned mixed-use development in Menlo Park. 1,730 housing units, a grocery store, a pharmacy, a retail district that the Bellhaven community had been negotiating for 5 years. The official reason? Shifting real estate market conditions. Menlo Park Mayor Drew Combs Nash, on the record. "There's a hole in our housing element. 1,730 is a huge number to make up." Here's what nobody connected. The Willow Village cancellation represented more than 100% of Menlo Park's market rate housing requirement for its entire 8-year state-mandated cycle ending in 2031. One developer's exit wiped out an entire city's housing plan. And that developer's CEO had just moved to Miami. The pattern runs 3 levels deep. The founder leaves the state. The company writes down its physical commitment to the city it's headquartered in. And the city loses housing it was already counting on in its state-mandated plan. That is not 3 separate events. That is one balance sheet contracting at 3 simultaneous levels. And in Los Angeles County, the macro data confirmed what the Menlo Park Housing Board was seeing on the micro level. Los Angeles County lost 53,421 residents in a single year, driven by high costs and declining services. Chapman University economist Joel Kotkin put it plainly. The wealthy leaving doesn't just cost the state their taxes. It shifts the entire burden of funding public services onto the middle class. The only group left large enough to fill the gap, and the group least able to absorb it. This is the death spiral running in real time. Revenues fall. The state cuts services. Middle-class residents face higher property taxes. New York's Mamdani administration proposed a 9.5% property tax hike for exactly this reason. Higher costs push more middle-class families out. The tax base contracts further. And every year, the version of the same crisis shows up at the same podium, with a larger number on the slide. Now here is the part of the story nobody is reporting, and I want you to sit with this for a second. Florida won. On paper. Jeff Bezos, Ken Griffin, Mark Zuckerberg, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Peter Thiel, Howard Schultz, all of them now have Florida addresses. Miami built Amazon's 75,000 square foot Wynwood office. Citadel is converting a Brickell Bay tower into 1.75 million square feet of pure office space. AI firm Mavericks just moved its North American headquarters to Fort Lauderdale. Florida won the first round. 0 income tax, 0 capital gains tax, 0 estate tax. The receipts are real. But here is what Florida House Bill 7031 says, and I want you to read this carefully. HB 7031, introduced in the Florida State Legislature in 2026, proposes decoupling Florida's corporate tax laws from federal bonus depreciation and R&D deductions. That means higher effective corporate tax burdens. And circulating alongside it in the same legislative session is a discussion of a potential millionaire's tax. Marginal rates between 4% and 12% on incomes above $1 million, potentially effective as early as 2028. If that passes, it is not a tax adjustment. It is the end of the Florida model. And every billionaire who just moved there will run the same calculation they ran in California. The question is not whether the math works in Florida today. The question is whether the political pressure created by absorbing $2 trillion in billionaire wealth, with the housing inflation and infrastructure strain that comes with it, produces the same populist backlash that produced the California Billionaire Tax Act in the first place. The tax haven plants the seed of its own destruction the moment it succeeds. So here's the question I want to leave you with. 6 billionaires left California before a single vote was cast. The Hoover Institution says it cost the state a net $24.7 billion in present value. The LAO says the revenue loss continues forever. Mayra Castaneda's emergency rooms never got funded. Meta's 1,730 housing units never got built. Los Angeles County lost 53,421 residents in 1 year. And the governor knew. On the record. 32 days before the wire cleared. He named the teachers, the librarians, the firefighters. And then he promoted the structure anyway. The receipts don't lie. They just don't always make it to the front page. If you want to know which state is next, and there is a specific state right now with the exact same structural setup, the exact same ballot initiative in progress, and the exact same governor saying the exact same things Newsom said on January 29th, subscribe before you scroll away, because the next video is the case file, and the case file is already being built. The wealthy don't debate bad policy, they just leave, and they take the math with them.